Okay, hi everybody. This is Ginger Cook from Houston, Texas, and I want to welcome everybody to Ginger Crumbs. This is a Monday night featured event with gingercooklive.gallery. Our moderator is John Little. He's attached to the other end of my little iPhone here, and when you ask a question, he then reads it to me, and there's like a 1 minute delay, so if you don't get your question asked, just put it in caps and ask again. Sometimes our groups get a little chatty, and everybody, this is sort of fun because you get a lot of people on here and they all haven't seen each other since I don't know, the last time they talked on Facebook, I guess. And so there's quite a bit of action that happens here. But tonight, what we do on Monday nights is we try to answer questions that have been either written into us or we've gotten over the months. Now, if we use one of your questions, and you can use our Contact Us form at gingercooklive.gallery, that Contact Us form, and you write in a question that you would like demonstrated on a Monday night, and we use your question, we will give you a coupon for any one of our 15 downloadable videos, which is really a nice gift, and because we can do that to anybody in the world. You see, I like that because it doesn't matter where you live, we can send you the coupon code. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is 10 things commonly done incorrectly by acrylic artists when varnishing or not varnishing. I mean, that's the thing. The first one I'm going to tell you is not varnishing your painting. And people are going, well, why would I want to varnish the painting? That's the first thing. If you don't varnish it, that would be the first mistake. And the reason that people don't varnish it is there are some really extraordinary instructions that come with most varnishes, all of which, in my opinion, are totally incorrect. So you might have varnished a couple times, decided you really didn't like how it looked, and then thought, you know what, this is done. It's dumb. I'm not going to do it. Now I'm going to varnish a painting tonight. This is one that we've done for our Wave and Water Masterclass. Doesn't have any varnish on it. But first off, now I'm going to varnish a painting. Now why am I going to varnish it? Because what the varnish is going to do, and we're using an acrylic varnish. It's not like an oil painting varnish, which sits on top of the painting. And oil painters is a whole different thing. It has nothing to do with oil paint. This is just acrylics. It actually bonds molecularly with the canvas. It does not come off. It bonds in there and seals and protects almost like a total blanket layer over the same thing. Somebody wrote to me today and just asked, they were doing a chair, I think, for bar stools. They were painting on bar stools and said, how many coats of varnish should I use? And that's a good question too. And we'll talk about that too as we go on. Or kids' furniture. I've painted a lot of that too, because I have 3 grandkids. If you guys know Cinnamon, the art Sherpa, my 3 grandkids have gotten an awful lot of painted furniture over the years, which is really fun to do too. And that's acrylic paints are great for that, but you must varnish. So your 3 choices of varnish, in my opinion, are gloss, medium, and varnish. My favorite one is Liquitex. I use this all the time because you can also add it to your paint, and you can use it and just keep painting. And so gloss, medium, and varnish, that's the one I like because I prefer a gloss finish. Now not everybody does, and that's okay. So then you have Liquitex matte medium and matte varnish. They call this satin finish, but really matte varnish, okay? And if you wanted a real satin, you could kind of mix the two, maybe 50-50. You can be a little your own chemist. But basically, if you want less shine, dump a little matte in it, okay? Now here's the caveat with that though. If you put some matte varnish on, it has a slight haze to it, like a white haze. It's imperceptible, but I think I've told you that you can use like mixing white. Like for instance, in this painting, do you see how this, let me zoom in on this painting because this is, maybe I can explain this better. Do you see in this painting, the way that this mountain has been pushed back into the distance, this was done with mixing white. But suppose I felt that this was just too fancy. I didn't want anything that much. I could do several coats of matte varnish and get something similar to that. Almost a very slight haze, kind of dulling the painting. And that's not an effect I normally want. Now your other choice is just a gloss varnish. It's not as thick. It's also, you can use that. It's a thinner varnish. That's fine too. I prefer the medium in varnish, but because I want to be able to see the brush strokes and so forth. But maybe if you had a very flat picture that you didn't see any brush strokes in at all, this might be something you'd want, kind of like I don't know but you know what I'm talking about, almost very almost stained glass looking in your painting, and so a brush stroke would just look weird because you don't see any in your picture. Then a gloss varnish might be nice, or this is when you might turn around and use an acrylic coating. This is by Krylon. This is a spray-on varnish. My problem with this, and it's gloss, my problem with this is that there's a couple times when I want to use this. I don't like it as well as this, and here's why. The gloss medium and varnish will actually bring the colors out. If somebody were kind enough to give me my own brand of paints, I would never call this varnish. I'd call it final color popper, because what it does is it bonds with your colors and brings them and pops them out, and suddenly your painting has much more vibration, vibration of color. It's vibrancy. It's fantastic. So then, okay, so that's the first. So again, reiterating, mistake number 1 is not varnishing at all. So now you're going to varnish. So what do you think number 2 is? Well, number 2 is shaking the bottle. I mean, mostly you shake everything, right? So if you have a bottle of something, this is almost, you can't stop yourself. You shake stuff. Don't shake this. We don't want bubbles in the varnish. So, all right, everybody's agreed with that. We're not shaking anything. However, you are going to shake the Krylon can. Now, here's the deal. Now, if you're going to use spray varnish, when you're done, you must turn the can upside down and hit the spray nozzle and clear it and store it upside down. Okay, store the can upside down, because it's all very well the first time you do it. Okay, this is perfect with anything. The first time you spray anything with spray paint or spray varnish, it works fine. But then the next time happens, and if it clogs, it will spit out something like little bumps or junk on your canvas, and guess what? You can't get that off. You have just wrecked it. Ooh, you didn't know that, right? So unless you're using a new nozzle every time, you can't, you have to be very careful too. When you're using any kind of spray, you have to turn the thing upside down and hit that thing and spray it till air comes out. Make sure you've cleared that nozzle. And you've got to shake that really well. As much as they say, read the directions. There's a little, you can hear my little thing in there. You shake that, and then when you're storing it, again, I like to store it upside down. So that's something you probably didn't know, but we're going to cover that. All right, so moving on, this is sort of fun. We haven't varnished anything yet, but we could get out some stuff to varnish. Now, this isn't exactly rule number 10. I was many years into varnishing before I figured this one out, and I know it's kind of stupid that it took me so long. But one of the things you do is have a container to put your varnish in that you can then, if you have any left, you can dump back in your little bottle. Okay, so that's something. So that's not even a mistake. That's just that's a suggestion. All right, so number 3, we said that, don't shake it. Let's go to number 3. Not laying your piece flat when you varnish. Okay, so most people, come on, I'm painting on a desk here because I'm filming, but most of us really, in real life, we're painting on an easel, yes? So when we paint on an easel, so when you go to varnish, and I've done this, you think I can be careful. But you can't, you want to avoid drips, and if you're not varnishing flat, then there's a chance that the varnish is going to start running, and that's a hot mess. Okay, so you want to avoid that. So that's what we're going to say, is that we're going to varnish flat. So if we're varnishing flat, that's number 3. Then the next thing I would tell you is varnish in good lighting. Okay, well, I'm going to just turn this overhead light on for a minute and let you see. I'm just going to brighten up this painting a bit. Do you see it? See how I brighten up this painting? That's my overhead light here. You want to varnish in really, really good lighting, because the paint absorbs the varnish at different rates. So you're not sure where you've been. You want to be able to walk around it or turn it around or something. So good lighting is important. So that's number 4. And then I would add to that, let's see, 5 is I'm going to tell you 5 in a minute, but besides that, yeah, okay, that's good. 5 is, you see this little tab on this little piece of tape on my varnish? Have a dedicated varnish brush. This is a good thing to know, I'm telling you, because guess what? You never really get it all out of your brush. Oh gosh, that's true. You can wash it, and eventually, after about a year, your brush gets really stiff, okay? So I have a dedicated, I just decide which brush I'm going to sacrifice for varnish, and people say, well, what kind of brush? You want a very soft brush. I usually say buy something fairly inexpensive. Doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, that's a couple examples. Something pretty soft, equivalent to the size of the picture you're painting. All right, so if you're doing a 16 by 20 or maybe a 30 by 40 painting, and you didn't paint it with a brush that size, these may be too small. So have some different varnish brushes depending on what you're painting, and you want them fairly. You don't want them so cheap that they're gonna leave hairs in your painting. So when you buy a brush that you've decided, or maybe retired a brush, probably more likely for varnish, make sure you've washed it really well and really try to get any loose hairs. If it seems like it's shedding like an old dog, pick another brush, okay? Because you don't want to be sitting there with a little tweezers trying to get the hairs out of your varnish coat. Okay, so the next thing is, that was number 4. What was that, John? I'm losing count here. That was 4. Okay, dedicated varnish brush. That was 5. Okay, let's go to 6. How to put on the varnish. Okay, so there are some artists out there, I'm not going to be mentioning names, who have suggested to you that it's perfectly okay to go up and down like this and back and forth like this, okay? And that's what they tell you on the directions. So if you go up to the website, that's what they tell you to do. This is hugely screwy. You don't want to do that. You want to paint your painting and varnish. Now I'm going to start varnishing this. You want to paint it varnish it in the direction same way that you've painted it. Okay, so you'll notice how I'm varnishing flat. Now I painted this hill kind of coming down at an angle, so that's how this is painted. Now these clouds up here, I'm going to be going this way with. And the reason that you do not want to go up and down and back and forth is you're going to get a glare on this thing that's going to make you so unhappy. It'll just glare terribly. And I can tell you a story, true story. One of my students is now a really successful artist. She had gotten a commission to do about a 40 by 60 painting for a very rich Texan, some sort of Texas landscape with some cows and stuff. And she'd spent, I don't know, a couple months on this painting for the guy and was getting paid well for it. So even though we'd had this discussion about varnishing it, she went ahead and varnished the whole thing back and forth and up and down. And when he hung it in his living room, the glare on it was so horrendous that you couldn't see the painting. It was just awful. And she called me up and she said, what can I do? And I said, I don't think you can do anything because it's showing your brush strokes. I think it's he's just going to kind of live with that, maybe try to light it differently. But that's not something that you want to have happen. Do you see how I'm not doing one long stroke here? You see, as I'm talking to you, I'm telling you the story, and I'm coming here to the tree here, up, down like this. Now what happens when I get to the water? Well, when I get to the water, now I'm going to go back and forth like this, because this is how my water went. Okay, so if you go too fast, you get bubbles. I used to hire somebody to varnish my paintings because I'm not very patient, you know. I'm just really truly not. I go too fast. And this gal used to take art lessons from me, and she would varnish all my stuff and was extremely careful, probably because she didn't want to wreck anything I'd painted, but I loved how she varnished. Okay, now what about my rocks? So I'm coming like this down on the rocks, and I'm painting this the way the rocks were. I'm putting this varnish on the way the rocks were painted, exactly how they were painted. Now you'll notice how this is popping the colors. Okay, this is popping the colors really well. So the direction that you paint, the direction that you apply your varnish is hugely important. This is really, really important. I'm glad we're just saying this all in one thing, you know, kind of that. Okay, so that was, I think, one thing we said. That was 6. All right, so then 7. Let's see, what was 7? Oh, yeah, this is what happens. Some of you guys, I'm not mentioning names, but I bet there's a few of you out there who you're thinking, if this is good, then I should just keep doing this. I should just sit there and do this and this and this and this, and I'll just keep going over the one spot, and I'll go over it and over it and over it. Oh my gosh, don't do that, because guess what happens? If you go over it too many times while it's still wet, it will turn white. And how do you fix that? You paint over it. So you want to put the varnish on, pay attention to how you did it. Here's our wave. We're going to go up here like this with the wave, like that. Then I'm going to come back down the other side, like this. And right over these little dark rocks is bringing my colors out. Okay. Now, what happens is when you do it in good light, and you kind of tip it like this and you turn it and you kind of do that, what happens is you may see a spot you missed. Okay, so just kind of turn it around a little bit, you know, kind of spin it around and look. you've got a little window to fool with this and fix it. Other than that, just stop, leave it alone. This is why you do 2 coats of varnish. You always do 2. Here, let's going to get these rocks here while we're talking about it. You always do 2 coats of varnish, and that is absolutely and then if you miss something, and you may see it, like for instance, I recently varnished, let's see, where'd it go? I think I had it over here somewhere. Did I? Oh, well, I recently Oh, somebody asked the question, how long does it take the varnish to dry? You can recoat in an hour. Overnight's better, but you can recoat in an hour. If you were doing a project like a table or a chair or something like that, I would give it at least 2 hours between coats and then really get it. So you can see now I'm kind of turning this around, and now we're going to come right on to number 7, which was going over this too many times, right? Now what's number 8? Number 8 is letting drips be on your canvas. Now you saw this was pretty easy for me, right? I'm kind of turning it around. What you want to do, if you have a big piece, this is a little painting, but if you have a big piece, take your container and reach across your canvas so that you don't get any drips. Because if you allow this to drip, let's just make a drip here for you. If you allow this to drip and not fix it, and let me zoom in and let you see it. If you allow this to drip, here's my drip. You see my little drip here? If you, on a big piece, you could miss this, particularly if it was in some sort of light area. This will dry like that. When you go to scrape it off, it'll take you clear down to the bare canvas and leave a little hole. So you want to avoid drips. So I've seen paintings ruined doing this. So you want to make sure that you go around, make sure you have no drips. That's your other little task when you're varnishing. No drips. And like for instance, this tree, I'm going to make sure that even though I did the water this way, then I'll come up this way with the tree, make sure I varnish the tree separately. So that's how I'm going to varnish this painting. But now what about a different painting? I'm going to lay this flat on the chair here somewhere. Now, what about something else? Okay, we're going to take a couple questions. Okay. I'm going to zoom back out. So we're going to take a couple questions before we get to 9 and 10. Okay, go ahead, John. Well, we talked about that at the very beginning. The question was, when do we use a gloss medium and varnish as opposed to a gloss varnish? The gloss varnish is much thinner. I like the medium and varnish because you can not only can you add this to your paint, but I like the thickness of it. Okay, for me personally, I like the thickness of it. I don't dilute any of these with water. Okay, but where you might like it, for instance, like if you were, this is thinner. So if you were painting this over a very rough canvas, for instance, this is a palette. This little piece was done with a palette knife. All right, it's very rough. Now, what happens with the gloss medium and varnish is that it'll start to puddle in these little raised sections of your picture. Okay, so let me just zoom in and let you see that real quick. See these little raised up sections, because this is all textured. It wants to, and particularly, for instance, a good example of that would have been Starry Night. If you guys happen to watch the Starry Night video, let me just show you this. All right, you can see how this is very thick. Can you see that? I'm going to tilt it up a little bit like that. So before, we added a bunch of gels and mediums to this to get it thick. If you watch that video, so then if you wanted to varnish this before you added the next layer of stuff, which we added our final coat on this was a light gel medium, you could do two things. You could use a spray varnish on something with lots of texture. That's not a terrible idea. But then again, that has its own aspects. Or you could use a little thinner varnish, but the gloss varnish is going to be thinner if it doesn't have the medium in it. It's going to be slightly thinner. It's going to do the same thing, but be slightly thinner, and probably flow around your cracks in the canvas and your texture. If you have a very textured canvas, you might want to just do gloss varnish. So then the question comes up, for instance, like what about different directions? Like for instance, here's this Van Gogh piece that we did. This is one of the paintings that you can learn lessons on our website. So Van Gogh Almond 3. Well, you've got I'm going to just varnish this for you real quick. You've got brush strokes going this way, see, at an angle, and then they're going up and down. So you have to pay attention to that. This is going up and down, this is coming this way, this is coming this way. Here's the little stem. So you have to kind of think. It's some of these pieces that you're varnish, it doesn't take long, just using up a little varnish, doesn't take long. Now I'm going to go over these flowers, and I'm going to go ahead and varnish each one individually, even though I just sort of painted over them. Those will probably be last. Here's my little orange stripe, and look at how that brought the color out on that. Now this is all up and down because that's how I painted it, okay? All up and down. I'll go right over these flowers like that. Then I'll come over the flowers and redo it. You know, kind of make sure that I've added the little bits for each little blossom and so forth, and maybe just kind of outline the stem. This will make a huge difference when it dries. It will feel like you had been painting with this all along. So that's, you know, again, and you want to let this all dry flat. The thing about using a spray varnish, and I want to mention this, the thing about using a spray varnish is you don't want to do this in the house, maybe the garage, outside on a very still day. You've got to worry about bugs getting in your stuff. Yeah, okay, well, in Texas you do. Little nit flies that show up in the mornings. You don't want to do this on a windy day. I mean, there's a whole deal on using spray varnish, and it doesn't do, to me, it doesn't do the trick like these matte medium and varnish or the gloss medium and varnish. But again, like for instance on this one, for instance here, I'll show you the difference. This was the heavy varnish. Let me show you what the gloss varnish looks like without the medium in it, okay? So it's thinner. It's still milky looking. Still milky looking. So now I'm going to use a different varnish brush because I had that. So here's another one. So here's this one. Now I'm going to varnish this, and because it's thinner, it's not going to catch. It's not going to catch in all these little crevices of this painting. Okay. Now notice I'm kind of going back and forth, almost like half circles when I varnish this. Do you see how I'm doing it? Half circles like that. And then again, this is thinner, so it's not puddling in my texture. Now if I have a lot of texture, then I would take another brush, maybe a dry brush, and if I found any puddles, I would very carefully remove them. So that's where the good lighting comes in. Now what happens about these trees? See, you're going to come up here like this with the trees. They were painted kind of like this, and you want to go over this and paint it. So there's our, you can kind of see. Now I'm going to come down this way with here like this over the logs. I'm going to add this coat of this very nice thin coat of varnish. So that has its place, and it's all fine. Just the regular varnish. It's a little thinner, but it works just fine. Works just fine. And then you want to wash this brush in water, soap and water, and dry them flat. And then again, once you've had varnish on it, then you don't use your good brushes for varnish. Okay, next question, John. Well, that's the thing. The question is, if you varnish, can you later use the gesso and use it for another painting? Listen, you guys, again, I'm going to say it. What you're talking about when you're using a varnish in medium, this is binding molecularly to the canvas. This is the acrylic without the color, okay? What are you really using? This is non-colored acrylic. So this is molecularly binding to your canvas. It hasn't hurt it at all. You can paint. You can, for instance, sometimes what if you were doing a clipper ship or something? That's the only thing I can think of. You know, one of those ships with all the sails and those tiny little lines that go everywhere, and you're thinking, man, my canvas is so rough. How am I ever going to get those lines so thin? Well, one of the tricks is to take a varnish and varnish your canvas just the way I showed you, and varnish it and dry it, and then keep painting, because what happens is the varnish fills in the little crevices in your canvas and makes it easier to paint over. And I wouldn't gesso over a picture. The question is, can I gesso over it? I would just turn it upside down and paint over it. Now if you had a lot of texture, you might not gesso, but maybe I'd use modeling paste or something to get rid of texture, because once you put texture on, you're kind of stuck with it, unless you somehow, and that's where you might take a coat of modeling paste when it's dry and paint, smooth it out and start again. But 90% of the time I just turn the picture over upside down and just paint again. Okay, that's what I do. I don't fool around with that at all. Okay, so let's get down to the last of these. I think we were okay, but I want to just do one more. It says the next mistake, number 9 is only 1 coat of varnish. You don't get lazy on me, please. Do 2, because tomorrow you're going to see someplace you've missed, and it doesn't matter. You'll see it because you can kind of hold this up. See how it brought the color out? Isn't it pretty? It really brings the color out in the pictures. Let me show you the difference between this picture now, the greens in this picture, and this picture. This one has not been varnished. This one has. Do you see? And you can see it just brings the colors out just beautifully. We're doing this Tuesday night, by the way. Tomorrow night we're going to be painting this bird live at 7:30. Should be fun. So yes, so number 9 is not doing 2 coats of varnish. And the last one, before we answer any more final questions, is talking on the phone, visiting with your friends, shooting YouTube videos while you're varnishing, stupid stuff like that, so that what happens is you lose your place and you don't know where you've been. So don't talk to anybody, when you're varnishing. Just focus on that, because it's really easy to confuse it. And then I'm going to give a bonus of number 11. Okay, so I tell you what, I love Liquitex. I use their products all the time. I like Golden. I like all those people, and all very nice. But one of the things that Liquitex does that annoys me to no end is all their mediums have the same kind of label. Okay, yes, there's some fine print somewhere. You don't have, when you get older, you need glasses, and telling you what, it'll tell you what it is. But one of my students, true story, she thought, well, she took a month or more to do this giant, beautiful ocean painting. And she got up in the middle of the night and thought, I'll varnish it. And varnish looks, varnish looks white, like milk white when you put it on. So she accidentally dumped out, instead of varnish, she dumped a container of gesso, and she painted the whole thing white again, and then called me up the next morning and said, what can I do? I said, start again, paint over, because it's gone. So do pay attention. If I don't know if you need to put a ribbon on your varnish thing, or because if you don't grab the wrong bottle. That's all I'm saying. Figure out a way that marks it and makes it sense for you. So, all right, those are our 10 things that happen when people use varnish that you want to avoid, and try to do something different. And now I'm open for questions. Okay, John, next question. Let's just put some more pictures out here. Okay, so this is a good question. I'm just going to show you some paintings we're doing. Hey, this is Wednesday afternoon. You like this railroad station? We did this elephant last week. We did this last week, okay, on the live classes. Okay, so the question is, when and why would you varnish would you add paint to your varnish, okay? So, well, glazing would be one reason why you might add paint to your varnish. And let's see, what do I got? And we're going to do a whole thing on glazing, but I can show you that really quick. If your glazing is any time that you have, say you have something that's lighter, say like this beak, and you want to change the color of the beak, but you want to be like cellophane, so thin that almost transparent. Sometimes you can glaze, and you can use water, but if you use too much water, it won't stick to the canvas. Okay, so then, but if you use a medium in varnish, or what they call a glazing or a glazing medium, either one, you can then add that to your paint, and you can, because remember this is polymer, okay, so you can then add a little bit of that to paint, and then when you glaze over it, you can get something very, very thin, dry it, and do thin layers of glaze. So barely tint something where you couldn't go that thin if you were just using water, because you have to have more pigment for the water to bind. So you have to have a certain ratio of pigment to water, but you can get very, very thin adding color. The next time you might, for instance, add varnish to a painting, or a medium to a painting, is suppose you were doing, I think I've got a video on YouTube showing how to use varnish as a blending medium. So you might, you want to sort of blend something. Oh, we've got some varnish out here. Why don't I just show you that real quick? I don't mind. I can show you that real quick. We can just take some paint somewhere and do something with it. All right, so suppose, let's get a little plate out. Suppose we wanted to blend in some sky color. So let's just take some white, like this. And let's just take some blue. Just make this real simple. The question is when might you put it in there, okay? And, all right, so I want to blend this. So if I added a little bit of medium and varnish to this, just put a little bit here on the plate, like that. Don't need very much. I might come in here like this with the, you're going to do about, I don't know, maybe 25%. I might come up here with my, just do like this. Here's my sky, all right, like this. All right, now this will stay wet longer. Now as I add the white paint to this, I can keep going back and forth with this. See, just like this, and I can keep adding a little bit of white paint. It will thin it down a bit, make the paint a little bit more translucent, but you can go over it. Big areas, you can keep going over it. It's going to delay the drying time. Then if you want to come back with a little, you can mix right on the canvas. So if you want to come back with a little more paint here, pigment on top, which is normally not how I would do any blending, but you see I can come right into the paint. I can mix that into that matte medium or gloss medium and varnish, and I can get this nice translucent, gradation going. And here's some white paint. Come down in here. Let's just take some more white because my brush is dirty. Come down here like that. Then I might wipe my brush off if I didn't want any streaks. I could keep going over this and over this until I had it the way I wanted it, and it would stay wet. You see that? I can really blend. So that's, sometimes you can also buy a blending medium, and sometimes people say, what's the difference? Quite frankly, maybe you can buy a blending medium, and I like this thick stuff, the blending thick stuff, but this, I always have medium and varnish, and this works pretty well. See how you can get some nice, and if you were talking about a big painting, say like 30 by 40 or something really big, where you had big expanses of areas where you were blending and you didn't want it to dry faster than you could get the paint on the canvas, adding a medium to it is very handy. Okay, and maybe another example might be, and I can just show you here. Another example might be it gets a little bit more fluid. Okay, so look here, it has a little bit more fluidity. Maybe you were trying to do some very, very thin lines like that. All right. And so if you have a little varnish and a little matte medium or gloss medium and varnish, what you've got is you can then, it's going to flow a little bit easier. Acrylic paints, oil paints, people do this and they have no problem. Acrylics have a tendency to kind of drag a bit, and this makes it a little more fluid, and it doesn't change your painting at all, okay? And if you were worried that it might, you could use you didn't want that shine, you could use the matte medium too. That either one would work, okay? So you absolutely could do that. Now here this is. Now this is going right over wet varnish, but let's see if I was going to put a tree up here like this, okay, and like that. See, I can come up here like this with this, with this paint, and it's gonna flow a little nicer for me than it might otherwise, and that would be a reason to add it to your paints. Maybe you want it to have more, I don't know, more something, a little bit brighter or something like that. Abstracts, maybe you want something a little brighter and you want it to be kind of shiny as you go. But I would still varnish it when I was done. I would still add another coat of varnish because it seals and protects like a blanket over the whole thing. So that might be an example of how you might use that. Put that out of the way. Any more? All right, so we'll take some more questions, John. Okay, so the question is there a particular soft brush that I like to use for varnishing? Well, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a brush for varnishing because it's sort of toast, okay? So sometimes I will have a very nice brush that's still soft, that maybe it's kind of worn out. That's a good one. Again, like for instance, this was a fairly big, I don't know what these are. What is this? Angular. This was a fairly expensive brush. It's a Creative Mark brush. It's angular, it's soft. That wasn't bad. I didn't hate that. I've used actually my big, you know, I have actually, as terrible as this is, I have used when my ruby satin silvers wear out. I'm not against using them as a varnish brush because they're nice, even though they have some stiffness to us. That they're not, they still make a pretty good varnish brush. The thing of it is that as long as it doesn't really matter. You can't have it so cheap. Simply Simmons are very inexpensive brushes, and you know they're around $2.50 to $4.50, and you know certainly something under $10, and they're a nice brush. It just whatever you do, just make sure that you've declared that brush your varnish brush, because there's a temptation to just grab any old brush, and the thing is you never ever get the varnish out completely, and eventually the brush gets stiff. And I guess you can soak it in chemicals and stuff and clean it, but I just keep a couple brushes. I tag them like this with the tape, and those are my varnish brushes. And I mean that to me is, you know, works pretty well, and I would say that that's probably a you know very good thing. And again, I want you to see the difference. You see how nice and shiny, and how it brings the colors out. Where you really see it is in the red. So I'm going to just for the fun of it, I'm going to just take another little brush. And I'm going to varnish this. I want you to see the elephant, just this rainbow part of the elephant varnished. So if your brush is wet now, wipe it off. Some varnish people feel like you can use. They want you to add water to your varnish and dilute it. Golden does, and I've used theirs. And I personally, I don't feel like taking a measuring cup out and start adding a ratio of chemical. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to just open the jar, pour out the varnish, and go. Okay? I have no interest in measuring things with water. They make a nice varnish. It's just not my favorite. My favorite is the Liquitex for that reason. Okay, so here's my. Let's look at our elephant here. I remember we did this last week. Now look what happens when I go over the red. Look at what happens to these colors on the elephant. Look how it just brought them out. See how it makes the darks darker and the light's brighter. See how beautiful that is? And sometimes you can do, like for instance, if you have, you could do a matte background and maybe just have your elephant varnished. That might be a thing you could do, or the water, you see? But look what it did. Now you're going to see it here too. I'm going to just do it right down here on the water. Look what it did to this turquoise here. But it just brings all the colors back. Okay, so now we're just going to keep varnishing this same way we painted it. Maybe I can show you up here in the dark. See how it's going to bring out these darks. Now I'm kind of going back and forth, almost like the same way I painted this. It doesn't take long to varnish something, particularly anything this small. This is pretty little. Okay, here's our back leg. But again, you don't want to keep going over it because it can go white on you. But you can see how that brought out the colors. It just popped them back out again. Just brings them back out, and it protects your painting. Then when you want to clean a painting after you've done that, you can just do a damp rag once your painting's done, and wash it, and it's fine. So it really does protect your painting. It's a wonderful. Everybody should varnish. I promise you. Just make sure you're picking the varnish for the project, the right varnish for the project. That would be one of the things I would tell you. And for instance, like we're going to be painting this Wednesday. I want to just get this blue paint out of the way here. We're going to be painting this railroad track. We're going to talk about Wednesday. We're talking about perspective. We're going to be painting this railroad track and this railroad building, and I want you to see even now the difference between the colors that have been varnished and not varnished, because this of course hasn't been varnished. And I tend not to varnish the paintings for our videos because of the glare. All right, let me just take off that overhead light now for a minute. Did that make it too dark? It did, kind of, didn't it? I got to pull that back up. So anyway, so that would be a good question to ask. And again, tomorrow night we're going to do this. And if you're wondering where we get all these neat ideas, what happens? This video on varnishing is going to stay up tonight. It'll be on YouTube. You can refer to it and write these things down if you want to, do that. And I'll come back and annotate all these and put them in print. For my friend Gianova in Italy, she said you've got to start, write them down because she doesn't always see perfectly what I'm saying. So I'm going to make sure I've written those down. But for instance, our gingercooklive.gallery, which is our website, we have over 150 lessons, John Little and I do, that are in our website, from one cookie, kind of very easy, to much more complicated. We add 3 a week. 2 of them happen to be the ones that we put up on YouTube. You can watch us live with these, and then they'll go into our lesson library by the weekend. And then the other ones we do a lesson of the week, a featured lesson of the week that is just on our website for our members, and it starts at 9 days for $9.95, which is, you know, just as practically just covers the cost of keeping the website up and all the website charges. And if you want personal art coaching from me, then you can do our a month at a time for $24.95, and again, then you can send your pictures into me and I'll make comments, and it's a nice membership, and there's always something fun for somebody and everybody to paint, which I really really do appreciate everybody that plays. It's a nice group of people. So any more questions, John? How are we doing with our questions? Oh, more questions. Okay. Oh, this is a great question. Somebody said, with a shine, can you get a good photo after varnish? Not so much. John's a professional photographer, and he thinks you can, but my personal thing is you almost have to go outside in daylight, because what happens is, if you take a painting like this where it's real dark, and you varnish this, then when you get is that white glare afterwards. So generally speaking, you want to photograph your paintings before you varnish them. Oh, that's a good one. That's a great question. Who asked that question, John? Who asked that question? All right, Linda, you have won the question of the night. Okay, you can go to gingercooklive.gallery and check our downloads out, because that is one of the best questions I've heard all night. You won a question of the night, and you can go, ding, 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 you've won the question of the night. You can go to gingercooklive.gallery, go to our store, pick out a downloadable lesson that you would like to win. We have over 15, anything from chimpanzees to roses to how to use a palette knife to all kinds of great stuff. Pick out something. We will send you a code that then you can use that and won't cost you a dime. You can download it and own one of our downloadable videos. We make those for people who live in areas where they don't get good internet, or maybe they just like to, some people just like to own stuff, you know, like own books, and you know, don't want to go to the library. They actually want to buy the book. So anyway, so Linda, you have won that for asking a great question, because truly you're best off taking a picture before you varnish. So any other questions? Let's see if we get any more great questions, John. Okay, so this is a really good question too. How long should you wait before you package a painting for mailing if you've varnished it? Well, I think some of it depends on the time of year. I would say that in the summertime, you know, it depends on how you're mailing it. I send most of my pictures, I do FedEx ground, because they get there relatively in a hurry, and it's fairly cheap. Particularly, we're not talking about something like this. We're talking about like a 30 by 40 painting or something like that. They can take a larger size. The thing of it is that I would wait at least a day for the varnish to dry before I mailed it. That's my personal opinion. I wait at least a day. Make sure that it's really cured, maybe 2 days. And for instance, if you're using golden opens, I'm going to answer the ask. If you're using golden opens, you must wait 2 weeks before you varnish it. Aha, you didn't know that either. Yeah, the golden opens, you've got to wait for. We talked about that, but even after you've done that, you still want to. I would just make sure that it's really had a chance to dry. Remember, you're going to wait at least an hour between coats of varnish, but 2 hours is better, and overnight's even better. But certainly you can do that. Before I use string gel or any of the rest of it, I like to varnish it too. Make sure I protected the piece. So okay, so congratulations. That was a good question. Any other questions, John? Oh. Ooh. Ooh. Oh. Well, gosh, this is a good question. So here's the question. They didn't, you know, the question was a good one. Can you varnish a painting? This is our This was our painting of the week last month for our gingercooklive.gallery. I figured I might as well brag on that. And I got a little piece of yellow paint on there too. Do you see that from my finger, which I have to now paint over? Yeah, it's 40 years old. You found this thing. Now you want to varnish it. Well, for one thing, unless you painted it, you don't know if it's oil or acrylic. All right, so you're not going to use an acrylic varnish on an oil painting. You can use an oil painting varnish on an acrylic, but you don't want to use an acrylic painting on you can't put acrylic over oil. So I would be skeptical as to what it was. If it doesn't have a varnish on it, I don't know. You'd have to make sure it was acrylics. Remember, acrylics were invented in 1965. So by 1970, well, no, about 1955 is when they invented acrylics. So by 1965, they still had some. So that's like 40 years ago, a little over 40 years ago. People were painting. I was painting with acrylics then. And yeah, if it was acrylics, yeah, you could varnish it. Sure, if it was acrylics. Make sure you wiped it with a damp cloth. Clean it first. Yeah, because the thing is that you might have dust and dirt, and you don't want to just seal that into the picture, because you'll seal anything that's on it in there, like a vault. Yeah, next question. Okay, so do you have any yellowing? That's a good question. Do you have any yellowing with any of the varnishes you use, either spray or paint on? That's a good question. No, I don't have yellowing because I'm using Liquitex. I don't fool around with my paintings. They're actually worth some money, and I don't want to. I use a brand I can trust, and I really trust that brand, and I'm just not, so I don't. But for instance, here's where the yellowing occurs. Sometimes you'll be pouring like a epoxy resin. You'll see that with modern paintings. You'll see that beautiful epoxy resin. It's nice to show you this. Isn't this cool? Let me zoom back out on this is a diptych. This was our Wave and Water class painting for this month. Okay, let me zoom it out. Okay, so yeah, so no, I don't get any yellowing, but you can get yellowing. You can get yellowing with epoxies. So then I remember asking that question of somebody, as long as we're talking about it. So I asked some, I was at an art show one time up in Las Vegas, our big art expo in Las Vegas. My publisher brought me up there. And I saw a lot of people that were using resins. And so I went around and asked all the artists what they were doing. And some were willing to talk to me and some were not. You know how people are. They're just so guarding these secrets, like somehow you're going to steal something they're doing. It's so silly. But one guy finally said, yes, he says he went through all the epoxy resins that were, and the one that didn't yellow was surfboard varnish. And that's what he used, like a surfboard resin, when he was doing those resin paintings. He wanted surfboard and it didn't yellow. But other than that, you can get a little, some of that can be yellowing. But I've not found any of my Liquitex stuff to yellow at all. Because remember, it's not sitting on top like varnish. It's molecularly grabbing the paint underneath and becomes part of the painting. It's a pure polymer. That's what you're putting on here for acrylics. You've just got to dismiss the old oil painting ideas of varnish. This is a pure polymer that you're putting on. It's binding. In fact, for instance, just while we're doing it, I'm going to just show you. For instance, see these are the two pictures. And I'm just going to take some varnish here, and I want you to see the difference between the two now. I'm going to varnish while we're talking. I'm going to varnish this. Look at that. See, I'm varnishing the water here like that, and I want you to see the difference between where these kind of get together. Do you see the difference between these two now colors on this picture? All right, see that? After the varnish. Look, this has been sitting here. This has probably been painted. I haven't varnished it, okay? So now I'm coming up here and doing this water. Not big long big strokes, but smaller, shorter ones. Coming over here with the rocks. But I want you to see, look at the difference between how it brings out the color in these, just even in the water. And let's paint the kid real quick. Let's do the kid. And look what it did with his, let me zoom in. Look what it did. I can't say enough things about varnish, and why you want to do it. And, I'm okay now. I'm going to just keep varnishing. It doesn't take long. Here we go, like that. And then if I if I miss something, then I'll come back with a second coat and finish it. But there. Okay, so this side was varnished. This side wasn't. And it's brighter. This is much brighter. And just the colors pop again. It just brings it. It's almost like how you put the paint down when it was wet. So that would be my good example. Okay, next question, John. The question was, if you varnished a painting and say in 3 years you just think you'd give it another coat of varnish. Well, I mean, why would you do it? I mean, if you've put 2 coats of varnish on it, it should be fine. So what you might want to do in 2 years is just take a damp cloth and clean it up. But I don't think you'd have to go back and varnish it again. It certainly wouldn't hurt. Like I said, when you're doing like kids' furniture, I did some really cute furniture. If you go to my other website, gingercookstudios.com, you'll see where under murals and stuff, I did some really cute kids furniture, and I think I did 3 or 4 coats of varnish on those chairs, and I'm not sure that I wouldn't have been better off after that had dried to have done a little shellac on top of that too, really seriously, because kids are kind of rough on things. So you can, I'm just at this point, I don't know why you'd want to, but you could certainly keep painting over it and then varnish. You could touch up something and varnish over it. You certainly could do that. Okay, you certainly could do that. That's a good question. Okay, what else, John? What do we got? Well, Kim wrote me in that she wanted to know how, but she was just going to paint on the Kim was going to do like a stencil, and then on top of a leather seat. So you'd have to. So what's going to keep that? I don't know, Kim. If you put the varnish on top of the leather seat, you're going to see, because the leather's flat like this. Okay, the leather's flat like this. Okay, and so you've got some sort of picture on here. You want to varnish the top of it. It's not going to bind. The varnish, the varnish is not going to bind to the leather like it did to the acrylic paint, because it's binding like this to the acrylic paint, but it's just going to sit on top of that leather. And I don't know that if it crack, or I'm not sure. I think I'd probably just add varnish to the paint. That's where I'd put the varnishes. Put a little varnish in the paint when you paint it, so that you have the varnish in the paint. And I wouldn't try to paint the whole top of the leather seat. If it was just a regular wooden seat, that would be one thing. Or, you know what? You could just go to the fabric store and buy a little piece of leather and paint on it and see what happens. I have painted leather jackets. I have painted leather purses. I painted all kinds of stuff that have been leather and have done really well with it. And didn't have any problems because I'm using acrylic paint. So I guess it depends on how thick and everything you're painting. But I think you could do that. I think that's pretty good. I would say that we thank you guys for hanging in there with us. Want to invite you to come back tomorrow and paint our birds with us. Where did I put the parrot now? It's amazing. I have stuff sitting here, and then I put it somewhere, and then who knows where it is. That's what's so extraordinary to me. You all saw the parrot. You saw that we had it. Where did we put the parrot? Huh. Oh, that's a good question. If you use a retarder a painting retarder, I don't think you have to wait. You have to wait 2 weeks before you finish it. No, I think but you might want to wait 2 or 3 days. But I don't think you'd have to wait 2 weeks. But again, these kind of questions like that, like for instance, call up the people that make the retarder, the Liquitex Gold and all these friendly folks. You can write them questions, those kind of technical questions, and they're much more likely to give you a scientific answer. And they're going to, like a doctor, do you think I should be operated on? They're going to say yeah, because if you die and they said no, then they feel bad. So they might tell you yes just because that's the safest thing to do. I mean, err on the side of, oh yeah, lady, you should wait 2 weeks for sure. Who knows? Are you in a hurry? Does it matter? Wait a couple weeks. It won't really matter. I think I waited a month before I varnished this one. I still have to do 2 coats, And I'm still sort of stuck with, I do not understand why I don't see where I'm showing you what we're painting this week. What happened to those paintings that we were doing this week? Oh, they're underneath here. That's where they are. Thanks, John. This is what we're painting next week, the parrot and here. And I wanted to show you this. You guys remember when we did this? I varnished it. You see, it's kind of shiny now. And I've got a spot where I've missed it. I can see on here where I've actually missed spots. So now I have to go over. That's what the second coat does. But look at how the green pops on this now because it got a coat of varnish. I love it. Okay. So yeah, this is tomorrow night's lesson. So if you're going to play with me tomorrow night, be sure to get a nice dark green color on your canvas before we start. And this one we're going to do Tuesday. So we would do probably almost a dark brown color on this for Wednesday. This is Wednesday's 1 p.m. live. This is tomorrow night at 7:30. So any last nifty questions before we close it for our hour? Well, Liquitex, or rather Golden, makes something called an acrylic ground. And it's still acrylic. Alright? And it's oh, this is a good question. This is a really good question. I don't know. Who asked that question? I think they get a prize for this question. That's a really good question. Okay, you've got something called an acrylic ground. Alright? And you've put it on your canvas. Alright. And Cinnamon does a lot of that. If you know Cinnamon in her personal work, she has tubs of that golden acrylic ground, and she spreads it over there like peanut butter on her canvas and lets that dry for 24 hours. And then what she does is then she paints on it, acts like paper. It wicks like watercolor paper. So it starts wicking away. You know, it's really cool, or fabric. And so then she gets all these interesting things. And then as she layers the acrylic on, the acrylic starts to seal the ground. And then, of course, eventually the more you layer it, nothing's wicking anymore, just the background stuff. And she does all these interesting drips and stuff. Okay, so now your painting's finished. Now what? Okay, so you would still varnish it. You might want to use matte varnish because you may not want to shine. The acrylic, that ground is going to be kind of matte, and it's going to kind of be a little bit softer. So you may want to use a matte varnish on that. You'd still varnish it. Also, the other way you would use varnish for an acrylic ground is that suppose you had part of your painting that you wanted to feel like watercolor, you know, kind of that very soft, all out of focus background, okay? And then part of it that you didn't. So you would do all your acrylic ground, and now you don't want it to diffuse anymore. Sometimes I use something called Liquitex stucco, and I like that for, you know, for maybe I'll show you that real quick. Liquitex stucco, and I use that for buildings and so forth. And at some point, let me just grab one of these. I'll show you. Okay, this is a really good question because, all right, so here's a painting I've got. All right, now this bright stuff up in here was done. This was done with a stucco, and it was done with like a coarse gravelly gel. And what happens was, just like the acrylic ground, when you put this on and it dries, it stains like paper. So you have that effect. Then when you don't want that to happen anymore, okay, when you don't want this to happen anymore, then you would varnish over it and you seal that and you keep on painting. So again, maybe part of your painting you want to seal it. So when you're all done with the part where you want it to be all, you know, kind of out of focus and wicking, then you go ahead and varnish it, dry it, and just keep painting. And it's like the ground never happened. It's like you never put any acrylic ground on it at all, which is kind of cool too, right? So what was the name of the person that came up with that? Carol, though Carol, you asked that question, so you have also won, ding 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 ding, a Ginger Cook downloadable video. So you go to gingercooklive.gallery and email us and tell us which one. Go to our store, pick out the one you would like to win, and which one you want to own, and we will give you the code, and you can then download it. So we have 2 people that have won downloadable pictures tonight, and videos tonight. So we thank you very much for that. And I think this is a good. This was great. I think we've answered a lot of questions about varnish. Should we just go over them? One more question? Okay, one more question. Okay. Oh, this is another great question. Gosh, John, so many great questions. Okay, so I got it. Wow. What would you say, that would be me, what would Ginger say, that would be me, about using a sponge brush for varnish? No. 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 You're going to introduce bubbles, that's true. And again, you're talking about going up and down. You want a brush. This is so important. Like, this is the #1 rule that people screw up on when they're varnishing. Let's go over the rules real quick. The first one is not varnishing, right? Then the second one was, where's #2 here, was shaking the bottle. And then #3 was, let's see, where's #3? Was not laying your piece flat. #4 was varnishing in poor lighting. 5 was not using one brush as a dedicated varnish brush. And then 6 was, the #6 rule is painting in the wrong direction. Remember, if I'm going to do this parrot, I'm going to follow this, and I'm going to do this way. You don't want to be going up and down, and so you couldn't possibly, the idea of the brush is so that it doesn't look like you varnished it at all. It's just that you have this beautiful painting, okay? So you wouldn't do that, but then, I lied. There is a time when you might do it, and when would that be? Okay, so some of you may not know this, but like Liquitex makes something called Solvar, S-O-L-V-A-R. I don't have a bottle of it out, or I would show you. I didn't think to show you. But Solvar varnish is what you use after you do this stuff. So, okay, so you've been happily varnishing along, and now you've used the gloss medium and varnish, which we've done, right? Like say on this. And suppose I wanted it shinier than this. It's pretty shiny, but this isn't shiny enough for me. I really want a shiny varnish here, okay? So I'm going to buy some Solvar varnish, and I'm going to wait 5 days after this dries, and then I'm going to varnish this with Solvar. Well, so basically, what I'm going to do there is almost like a clear coat of glass on it, okay, is kind of what I'm looking at, shinier. So what I've discovered is you cannot get Solvar varnish, even with, I have not been able to, maybe someone else can, but I have never had success getting it out of a brush. It is gone after you use it. Not only does it smell the house up, and it's just really a challenge to use it. But once you open it, it's really stinky, but the brush is just toast. So that's where a sponge brush might be very handy to put that on, and then you just put it in a Ziploc bag and throw it away. Don't just throw it in your wastebasket, or you'll just smell that forever. So that's when you might possibly want a sponge brush for varnishing. So what is that person's name, John? John? All right, Patricia, that was such an excellent question. It really was. It really came out. I think you're going to be our 3rd winner. John agrees. You're our 3rd winner for the season. For this evening, I want you to go to gingercooklive.gallery, go to the store, not the bottom of the page, but go to the store. We have 3 pages now of videos. You pick out the one you'd like, and we will email you the code so that you can try one of our lessons. You can own it and play. It's really fun. I think these are good questions, you guys. We thank you very much for watching. And every Monday night, we're going to pick a topic that somebody's asked. Somebody recently asked us about glazing, but I think we did a video recently with the eagle on how to glaze. Remember when we did the eagle? We showed everybody how to glaze. I think there was one of the eagles is still up on YouTube on how to glaze. People say, I don't understand what you mean by glazing. We can cover that again if you still think we need to. I can talk about glazing as one of the ideas. If you guys think that would be good. But if you have an idea that you'd like us to cover, please email me at gingercooklive.gallery and just tell us, and we will put you in the list. And if we use your video, you will automatically win one of our downloads. And I love that because I think that's so fun. We appreciate you watching. So is that our last question, John? All right. So everybody, everybody knows all the... Well, we were going to do this for 20 minutes. This is like a Gilligan's Island thing, isn't it? With the 3-hour tour. And then you got stuck on Ginger's Island for like an hour. We're so sorry. But you know, you have these questions and we want to answer, because where else are you going to answer these questions? And somebody, quite frankly, wrote me, listen, if you're a member of my group, if you're one of our subscribing members, I can take a lot of time and answer your questions. Otherwise, I pretty much have to answer them either through the comments on YouTube or whatever. But I had someone frantically in the art store last week, and I didn't even see the question, and they were trying to get this thick texture stuff for their Starry Night picture, and they wanted to know if they could start dumping in something else to make it thick. Look, the only thick thing you can do is do the stuff I recommend. Go to Dick Blick or Jerry's or Cheap Joe's for paint. Go online, order some stuff. If you live in a group, if you have, you know, I'm surprised if you have a group of artists that live in an area, one of the things you could do is start an art group where you order together so that you get the free shipping. Get together with your friends and get 3 or 4 of you, so everybody's ordering like $10-15, and then you get the price up and you don't pay for shipping. And a little secret is, if you order from an art store that doesn't happen to be in your state, you're automatically going to save tax. Good to know, right? You don't pay sales tax. So some good reasons to order online, but then you don't want to get caught with the shipping. Okay, and check your prices, everybody. So we appreciate that very much, and we think that this. See, where do we do with that oval painting? So I'm kind of excited about this oval painting. I just varnished it for you tonight. This one with the water. This is the July 1st Wave and Water Masterclass, which is separate from the other videos that we have. This is a separate subscription basis, and we'll have a link to where you can get these Frederick canvases for ovals if you want to try. If somebody wants to join the Wave and Water class and try this, I think it's kind of pretty. Don't you guys think that's kind of cool? This kind of old-fashioned timey painting with the waves and water, and you see how nicely this varnished and came out. And I'll do another coat tomorrow. So thanks very much. This was fun. All right, here's what I want you to do. Any comments or questions that did not get answered tonight, what I'd like you to do is to write in the comment section, in the video section. If it's still live, do we still see them? Or do you have to wait till it's up there? You got to wait 4 hours to type them in, otherwise they disappear. All the comments that you guys wrote tonight and talked about, those disappear after, even though we leave the video up. Your comments disappear. So if you have something you really want to know, just give us 4 hours. For YouTube, it takes them that long to process this video, even though we're leaving it up. Then write the comments, and then we'll see them. Okay? And likes and loves and all that stuff are greatly appreciated. Thanks, you guys.